right. Hello, everyone. This is Yuman Sang from Turn Zero. Welcome to our webinar. We're gonna, hold on for a minute or two as people come in, but hopefully everyone's having a great day. And thanks for coming. Um, we'll do a couple of housekeeping items, introduce the folks on this panel today, uh, as you are all coming in. We'll probably get started in about 20 seconds. All right. Hope everyone's having a good day. All right. Hey, well, let's get started. Like I said, my name is Yuman Sang. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Churn Zero. Really great to have you on a webinar today. A couple of housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded. And so within 24 hours, those of you who have signed up for the webinar, whether you've attended or not, will be getting a link to the recording as well as a link to the slides. So you don't have to take screenshots. You will get a copy of the slides within 24 hours. Let me talk a bit about the webinar today. Today, we are talking about the state of customer revenue leadership. We did a benchmark report in 2025. I'll talk a little bit about that, but before I do that, let me introduce my co-hosts. So today with me are Carrie and Rich. So Carrie Cunningham from 6th Sense and Rich Gardner from Pavilion. Really good to have these two folks who know a lot about the industry. Let me have them introduce themselves. Carrie, why don't you start?
Sure, thank you. Great to be here today. It's great research, and we're glad to be able to participate in it over the last couple of years. I head up research and thought leadership practice at 6th Sense, so that's really the what I bring to the table here is the research practices and experience there. So I was also an analyst prior to being with 6th Sense for Serious Decisions and Forrester for about 8 years combined there, and then have been in B2B a variety of roles over my entire career, which, as you can tell, my hair color has been a couple of years.
Thank you. Good to have you here, Carrie. And how about you, Rich?
At least you have hair, Carrie. Hi, everybody. I'm Rich Gardner, and I'm the president at Pavilion, which is a membership community for go-to-market operating executives. Pavilion has been built so that operators can gather to learn from each other, including several hundred chief customer officer members of our community, learn from each other, strengthen each other, figure out what's going on in the world together. Our mission at Pavilion is to put the right people in the right rooms to have the right conversations. I joined the business about 5 weeks ago, and prior to that, I've spent most of the last 25 years in tech-enabled services businesses, always on the go-to-market side of the house, always very close to customers and prospects. And I'm excited to be part of the webinar today and share a little bit about what our community members are talking about in this part of the world.
That's great, Rich. Well, glad to have you here. My first question, how do both of you feel about 2025 so far? Rick, maybe I'll start with you. Like, how do you feel about 2025?
It feels a bit like a tale of 2 years, Yuman, and maybe it's we've all aged 2 years so far this year. But what I mean by that is that time period from January through the spring, there was so much, particularly in the macro environment, that was happening with tariffs and the global market volatility and AI disruption on top of it, new tools being introduced to the market, new AI tools. I think it was a lot for all of us to process. And it felt a little bit at moments like the sky was falling. If I had to characterize the second half of the year, though, I would say like maybe this is the new normal. It's that we realized the sky hasn't fallen, and that we all just kind of need to figure out how we do our jobs in this new environment. And so it feels like discussion has returned to more like business as usual. Still a very challenging environment, but that sense of doom that maybe some of us felt in the first half of the year, I don't sense that quite as much.
That's great. I think we just have learned to live in the chaos, Rich. But Carrie, what do you think about 2025?
Well, I think the word chaos, I'll key in on that because I think it certainly did feel very chaotic last year. It still feels chaotic, but I think one of the things that I'm seeing, and I've talked to at least a few hundred folks in go-to-market roles, leadership roles this year, and I think folks are really focusing more on fundamentals and getting business models right that don't require that the economy be raging and that their category be raging in order to be successful. And I think, we, especially in tech, we've really relied on bigger waves giving us a ride, and now I think we've kind of understand we got to create uh, our own waves, and that's best practices, and that's making sure that we're doing the right things at the right time, taking advantage of the technology that's available, but doing it in a sensible way.
I think that's a really interesting way to think about it. In fact, let's talk about that. Let's go right into the survey because I think those are some of the lessons that we can learn. So a little bit about the agenda. We'll talk about the survey, talk about the bumpiness. There's some stability that we're seeing coming from the study. This study does focus on customer revenue, so we talk a lot about retention, and then maybe what can we do going forward. A little about the study. This is, I think, our 6th year doing the study. This year, we actually expanded the scope. So the scope went from just really a focus on customer success to the entire customer go-to-market team. And so hence 6th Sense joining, hence Pavilion joining the study. So really trying to open it up. About the 2/3 of the respondents had director titles and above. And everybody who participated either managed customer success, managed sales and account management. And so it was a really focused group. And these were all voluntary responses, of course. And it was everyone who was a partner helped create, got folks to participate. So we really appreciate it. All right, so the last few years has been bumpy. I think we kind of all know that. Now, look, your mileage will vary. Some of you during this time, maybe very stable. Some of you may have got hit really hard, and some could have actually, especially if you're in AI, could have had soaring results. So, but overall, I think it's fair to say it's been bumpy. So I want to show 3 stock charts that kind of show the bumpiness. So this is the NASDAQ stock index from 2020, so January 2020 to today, right? So it's a bumpy ride, clearly, right? Up and down, it's a roller coaster, but we are currently at all-time highs, right? So, but you kind of wish this was stable and nice up and to the right, but it is a bumpy ride up, which is kind of interesting. There's another index out there called WCLD, and WCLD is a index of public SaaS companies. So those of you who are on this call, a lot of you are probably SaaS or AI, recurring revenue. You can see that this has also been bumpy, but it has not come back to its all-time high. In fact, it is still almost half of what it used to be at its all-time high sometime in 2021. So this is the index of SaaS companies based on the Bessemer Emerging Cloud Index. And if I were to kind of map them over each other, right, the blue is actually the NASDAQ, and then the colorful one is WCLD. 2 different roller coaster rides, right? Both scary. But anyway, Rich, Carrie, either one of you, just having different indexes do different things and different people feeling different things. Does this explain the bumpiness for you? Is this, why people kind of has felt weird over the last few years?
Also, buy and hold. That's what keeps
Buy and hold, yes. Yes, don't trade. Yes, it's hard to trade.
That's certainly one thing it says. Yeah, I mean, it certainly does feel like that, particularly when you're deeply enmeshed in the SaaS world. And I think that's one of the things that's difficult for those of us who are in SaaS and have been, is that you can feel completely under siege. And I think this chart would explain why you would feel that. And then you look around at the economic numbers, the NASDAQ generally, and all of that, and you think, well, what the hell is going on? We used to be the high flyers, and now we're not. So I think that's the feeling I get.
That's bumpy. Yeah, Richard, any feelings from this?
Yeah, I think what I've heard from a lot of folks, including on the customer success side specifically, is that there seems to be some stabilization in the bumpiness, at least in day-to-day activity. I think for some businesses, in particularly like some seat-based SaaS businesses.
Mhm.
They're under tremendous pressure right now because there are going to be less heads from use of AI or just generally in budget cuts at some of their customers. And so the level of bumpiness might be greater for a business that looks like that than it is, for, say, a consumption or usage-based business. So there's some variation, but I do think that there's generally a little bit more stability people have been feeling the last few months.
Well, you teed me right up, right? Those things are settling. So the study has shown, that we've had 3 straight years of downward pressure on retention. So this is net revenue retention, probably the one that, if you talk to your CEO, they probably, that's the one that they really, really, really care about. But GRR, which is gross revenue retention, really focused on the customer itself rather than upsells. Both NRR and GRR have stopped decelerating. And so, this says to you, Rich, right? Like this says that it is less bumpy. Now, my question to both of you is, you know, uh, some of these some of these downward trends, 2022, 23, 24, a lot of folks have said, well, yeah, we all bought too much software,
Hmm.
right? Especially when the money was inexpensive during zero interest rates. So we bought a lot. We were focused on growth. We were spending everything we could to try to tweak growth. Um, in this new normal, do you expect this pink line to go back up? Or do you think we're here, right? That in fact, revenue retention is now, this is what it is. What are your thoughts on that? Carrie, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you can explain 22 through 24 to some extent, in that and if you go back before that, when money is inexpensive and companies are focused on growth, then there's a lot of experimentation, and the pressure is on to try to find new ways of growing, to maintain growth, to grow faster than somebody else. And so there's money available and you experiment. Naturally, a lot of those experiments don't work. Maybe it's because of the software, maybe it's because of your implementation. It's probably actually more because of your implementation or just the fit with your organization, your requirements. And so I think, when growth becomes less of the goal and becomes a little more moderate goal anyway, I think the availability of money to experiment is nil right now. So I think, what organizations are looking for are things that we can be confident are going to help us achieve our goals, not experiments that we want to throw some money at to see what's going to work. So that's kind of what that feels like to me.
So does that mean, if I'm going to play that out, right, there's less money to experiment, the experiments have played through, that would imply that this line should go up, right? Like retention should go up from here on out. That's your premise?
Right. If what we're
Okay.
doing now is working, then it should
Mhm.
go up, right? And
Okay.
so from what I'm seeing, and the more stringent focus on kind of fundamentals and really understanding what drives the results, I think that's what'll happen. That's what it seems like
Okay.
should happen.
Rich, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just to build on what Carrie said, a couple of trends that might be driving this that I picked up on from the community. One is that to the experimentation point, and we were all buying too much software. At this stage, companies have decided, no, 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 we have to make the best of this software that we purchased 2 years ago. And so now we're going to make sure that we're using it the right ways, that it's doing the things we need it to do. There's kind of a commitment and a maturity. Maturity is actually the better word. Maturity on some of these platforms that were purchased a couple years ago. And I think that's helping to show some positive results. Um, Customers just now have more experience using some of this technology and using it well. The other trend, though, that I would point to is separate but related, is that there's much more product-based effort to meet customers where they are and to build stickiness with customers. So this could be in part AI tools that exist in the product, but there's just more effort even within CS teams to figure out how do we intervene with the customer inside of the product. And I think that that's unlocking some real benefits.
Hmm.
those two trends might be what flatten the line. And to Kerry's point,
Right.
we're here a year from now, maybe it's going back up.
Yeah, no, I like those answers. That the only thing I would add is, if next year there are a lot of new, AI startups that join the survey, right, maybe their revenue is a little bit more experimental, right? So depending
Yeah.
on the mix. So it may be good to ask, are you a SaaS? Do you believe everyone believes themselves to actually, we can't even ask that. Everyone thinks they're an AI company. Everyone should be an AI company. So, but yeah, if there's going to be AI experimentation, this number may fluctuate over the next few years.
That I was going to say, I think that actually could be kind of a drag on that number, because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think, as with SaaS a few years ago, generally people are throwing money. Our research shows people are throwing money at AI
right.
without a really clear idea of how it's going to help, and that's the experimentation that I think doesn't work particularly well.
Right. I mean, it is actually experimentation by, CEOs and boards are asking for that. And so people are doing it. Let's go to the next chart. So this chart basically says, hey, tell me, are your buying decisions being delayed? Look, I mean, in general, this is improving. I think the bottom line is that it's getting better. It's marginally better. That folks are making purchase decisions in a more timely manner. Carrie, Rich, you both sell into this customer base. Do you feel less sting? Like, does it feel like people are making decisions this year more quickly than they've had in the last few? Carrie, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so two things. I think, to some extent, on the kind of our experience of what's going on, and then we also have some research data that touches on this. And so one of the things that has come out in our research data is that there are a set of companies that are putting off buying things, but the ones that actually go through with buying things, those buying cycles are compressed. And
Mm,
so what's curious is, when you're under pressure to get things done, and especially if you're going to experiment with AI, there's pressure to get those purchases done quickly, and get them in-house either before the budget goes away,
mm.
and or to start getting that result that you think is going to be super helpful for you. So a lot of things getting put off altogether, but also some compression in buying cycles.
That's an interesting nugget. So for those of you on the call who sell into customers, I know most of you have been challenged in getting upsells and cross sells across, the finish line over the last few years. I think what we're saying here is one, there may be an opening, and I think what Terry's saying is if there's an opening, you got to move fast,
Yeah.
right? Because they're going to move fast. Does that sound right to you, Rich?
Yeah, and I think some of the pressure, some of this speed is coming from the pressure CEOs and boards are putting on CROs and CCOs to implement new tools. So CEOs
Mm,
are out there in the world learning and hearing about all the impact all of these AI tools should be having on their business.
mhm,
Come back to their management team and say, hey, why aren't we doing X, Y, and Z? Well, that's a great way to get your CCO or CRO or CMO to start buying more
mm.
tools faster, because the pressure really is coming top down.
Yeah. Well, let's keep moving on. So look, the good news for those of you on this call is that, most of your company's revenue is coming from existing customers. And for you, that means that, you're managing, you should be managing from a position of strength. So, you know, uh, that's what we're seeing, and I think that bodes well for most of you on this call. But let's get back to some of the changes that we're seeing in the data. So, interestingly enough, both, so we asked about customer success and we asked about sales. Both customers success and sales teams and budgets are generally growing more than they are shrinking, which is interesting because it's definitely an improvement. The difference here is CS is growing more quickly and has more budget than sales. I'll repeat that. CS has is has more headcount growth and more budget growth than sales. And it's quite a discrepancy. Rich, your organization, has both sales folks and CS folks. Does this sound right to you? I mean, what do you think accounts for this, and does this actually sync up with what you think about what's happening in the marketplace?
So a lot of the feedback from our community is that budgets are actually tight, and
Mm,
just like in prior cycles, teams are being asked to do more with less. However, I think some of this hiring in the CS function aren't traditional, necessarily customer success managers. They're roles like data infrastructure process and improvement to better understand customer data. They are, digital program hires who are
mm,
thinking about a customer journey in a different kind of way, leveraging technology tools. So it's not that we're seeing lots of teams hiring big crops of customer success managers, but that there is hiring happening in this like
mm,
orchestration layer of.
mm. And but what do you think makes why CS, at least this is what the report says. Why do you think CS seems to have at least more headcount than sales folks? I think you and I maybe were talking about SDRs, do you think that
Yeah,
accounts for some of it?
yeah, for sure. At least part of it is that, one clear use case for AI on the sales side that it's gotten traction.
Hmm.
A lot that hasn't got traction, but has a lot of buzz. The one area that has gotten traction is uh, AI replacing a lot of traditional SDR activity, and uh, and so we have seen sales teams being able to hire fewer SDRs. I would not yet say that there's no role for a human SDR anymore. I'm not ready to say that, but we probably need fewer of them in a lot of
Yeah,
businesses.
yeah, that's what I'm hearing as well. Carrie, have you heard anything on the sales side versus the CS side?
Yeah, well, so one, I would love to think that this represents what we saw on the slide prior, which is that for most B2B companies, most of your revenue comes from existing customers. So,
All right.
um, I'd love to think that it's a recognition of that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember 4 years ago when I was at Forrester, we completely rebuilt the waterfall because of that. Numbers like, wait a minute, we're only dealing with this tiny fraction of the revenue that comes from net new customers. What's the point of that? So it would be nice if it were that. I think there's something to what Rich is saying about those kind of entry level functions, BDR, SDR functions that companies are trying to replace. I don't know if they'll be successful in doing it just because of,
Mm-hmm.
of the practices. I think they can in many respects. And in fact, our research shows that those functions don't really have the impact that everybody thinks or wants them to have anyway.
Right.
Yeah, so maybe there's some realization around that.
That's interesting. And I'll go back to your comment about, should CS naturally be growing at the expense of sales, especially as a organization matures. I mean, I've done a few startups, and in the beginning, it's all about the new sale, about the new logo, and you celebrate, it's heroic. And then one day you wake up 10 years into it, you're like, oh my goodness, like most of our new business comes from the existing base, right? And so you've been celebrating over the last few years, really, you really need to change focus. So that sounds like that's what happened at Forrester. All right, let's talk about CXOs. So this is actually kind of interesting chart. We basically, since we're talking about all things post close one, right? So the deal's been won. This is a customer. There's so many things to do. You can onboard, adopt, worry about adoption, renewal, expansion, cross sell, advocacy. So this customer team, we asked, does this team report to one CXO, or are these sort of different things to do divided among multiple CXOs? And it's kind of evenly split, right? And so if it's one CRO, I mean, it's one CXO, it's probably the CRO, right? Or maybe a COO. If it's split, it's probably split between a VP of sales, chief customer officer, and whatnot. So it looks like it's mostly evenly split. By the way, surprise, it doesn't matter. Like there's no difference in NRR right, within either scenario. But what I want to discuss with you, Rich and Carrie, is really changes in the C-suite. Um, my I have a premise. My premise is that, last few years, with the tightening of the belt, there are fewer CXOs in the C-suite than there used to be. My question is this a moment in time, or do you think there's a trend? Sometimes the C-suite gets large, sometimes it shrinks. Where do you think we stand, and where do you think we're heading? Carrie, I'll start with you on this one.
I would say unclear to me, but I think that there's really a bunch of experimentation happening within boards and executive teams about which roles need to be there and which ones don't. So that's kind of my only real perspective on it. Is that's what it looks like to me. Is a lot of
Experimentation.
experimentation.
Yeah.
Still.
Which you may have asked, I think maybe you asked Pavilion folks about this. What did you get?
Yeah, it's a mixed landscape, which might not be a
Mhm.
satisfying answer for this group, but I think that some businesses, the CCO is still reporting to the president and or the CEO at the company.
Mhm.
And there is increasing revenue pressure on CS teams. And because of that, there are companies who have moved that CS function under the CRO, and there are mixed feelings about it, right? There's
Right.
from even a customer success leader might prefer to work under the CRO because it guarantees, or it's a check on top of the funnel and the quality of customer that's coming in. It drives, life cycle commitment or responsibility to a single leader. So there's really mixed feelings in the community about this one.
It sounds like mixed feelings, and the mixed feelings will continue. All right. Sorry, folks. We're going to be having this conversation in 3 years. All right. Let's talk about renewals. So customer success as a team, right, is owning more and more of the renewal. But expansion actually is the opposite, right? So customer success is owning less and less of the expansion, and the account management team really is taking sort of front and center here. Um, I mean, this actually tracks well to what I'm seeing in the market. Carrie, Rich, does this look like, a trend that you see as well?
Sure. I mean, it does for me. It tracks for me,
Mhm.
and I think it actually does make sense because a lot of the times the customer success group is going to see the existing buying groups within the organization, the existing buying centers really well. But if your expansion is coming through selling to net new parts of the organization that you're not currently customers, your customer success team's not in a great position to do that. So
Right.
that's where I see the difference.
Yeah, starting from scratch. Rich, you agree with that?
And totally. Yeah, we're seeing
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. So this makes sense to this organization. So if expansion is taken away from you, CS, like don't take it personally. There seems to be reasonable reasons for it. All right. Let's talk about retention, adoption, expansion. So a couple things. One, we asked, what types of roles are within your customer go-to-market team? And there are a lot of roles, right? I mean, Rich, you even mentioned a couple of roles I've never heard of, so I don't even know what you were saying, but there's a lot of different roles here. Um, and you know, is there, well, a couple things that I see that maybe concern me, is, some of these roles, like everyone I think should have an ops person, right? Of some sort, and those feel really low to me. Leveraged roles like enablement and operations just feels like it's too low. But any thoughts on, like, if you were looking at this list, is there a role that you think is underrepresented or maybe even overrepresented here?
I'll comment on just one other thing kind of statistically before I pass over to Rich, but you should probably think of everything between customer enablement at 37% and revenue operations at 38 as being about equivalent statistically.
Mhm.
When anybody's looking at this, I would say please, take a lot of caution if you're going to draw conclusions from the difference between, say, customer enablement and CS operations. Had pretty good sample size, but there's a bunch of variability, and that means they're kind of think about them roughly the same. But there are big differences, of course, between customer success and account management at the top, and things like a dedicated expansion team down on the bottom, which, is the reason that you build product portfolios, right? So that you have multiple things to sell to people. So having dedicated troops to do that seems like it would be a better idea than having 10% of organizations having it.
Yeah, Rich, I know. What do you think about these roles and what do you think ought to be in here?
Well, a couple of things. Carrie's point, the dedicated expansions team at 10% kind of cuts against what we were talking about a few slides ago, which is most of your revenue comes from existing customers.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels like some companies might be underinvesting in that fact. The other one that jumps out at me is the data and analytics team. I think it's a relatively small percentage, given the importance of customer data being accurate for all of these fancy AI tools to operate the way we want them to operate. And it could be that these data roles just exist elsewhere at a business and not on the customer GTM team, but I would have guessed that percentage would be higher.
Yeah, I think I agree as well. I mean, I do think the sort of the leverage roles are underrepresented here. But all right, let's move
If I
on.
could,
Yeah, go
Iman,
ahead.
just back on that last slide,
Yeah.
if I could, I want to throw in a word for customer marketing, which is in the middle of that pack. When most of your revenue is coming from existing customers, those existing customers don't experience your other marketing the same way as organizations and people in them who are not your customers. And it seems like having a much more robust function that is designing communications specifically for existing customers would make a lot more sense than what it looks like here with 38% of companies having that function. So to me, that's a big miss. It's a huge miss if you're 70 something percent of your revenue is coming from existing customers, but you don't have a specific resource that is designing how you communicate with those folks. That seems like a big miss to me.
And also your customers want to hear from you. So,
Yeah.
like they're much more likely to like welcome that message than a prospect will. So I agree with you 100%, Carrie. Hey, a couple things to think about here. One is we basically took teams that had this function versus teams that did not have this function and compare their NRRs. And if you look at this chart, for instance, customer success managers, if you have a CSM role at your company, you in general have 8% better NRR than those who didn't. So this is basically like, all right, these were the top four. This indicates, if you were going to have roles that matter and that really impact NRR, these are the roles you have to be focused on. So this is actually just interesting for you on the audience. Rich, Gary, anything you would add to that? Yeah, sounds pretty obvious, right?
Seems
Yeah, I
very
mean, think about your margins. This is where
That's true.
these are
There is
big
margins.
difference, right? It's a
Yeah,
big difference.
yeah.
And so, this is really clear. We also, just behind the scenes, we look to see whether other factors explain this difference. So in other words, maybe the teams that have customer enablement roles are just older companies or bigger companies, and there is some effect there, but the vast majority of this difference is just down to the fact that they have this role. And I
Right.
think it indicates that there's a prioritization of the function.
I mean, you may spend more, right? You may spend more, but if you do want that elevated NRR, maybe it's absolutely worth it. But this is to your point. Actually, this actually spells out your point in detail, Carrie, is do you have a customer marketing function? It has dropped. I mean, this is a big drop. Maybe during the cutbacks, customer marketing really took a hit. Maybe it folded back into, sort of normal prospect marketing. And then it's the same for operations, right? So we call this a caution, right? I think most people in the industry would feel that these are well leveraged roles. So I think we've talked about this already. So let me move on to the next one. We did ask about technology. What tech did you use? And so so there's a big list here from CRMs to support ticketing systems, down to call recording, right? So a lot of this sort of, I think, makes sense to me. AI seems a little low, but other than that, any Any thoughts on this? Is there anything that surprised you here, Carrie or Rich?
Yeah, the AI standalone doesn't surprise me. Most our research shows most organizations, 83% of B2B purchases are expected to have some sort of AI capabilities
Hmm,
built into them.
right.
So, go-to-market folks are not going out and just buying AI and then seeing what to do with it. They want it in whatever it is that they're buying. They expect it to be there. So that I think explains that. All of the rest of the numbers just they struck me as low. That's you know what I
Yeah,
mean. It's
that's
just,
true. Why isn't it 100%? You're right. I
yeah.
mean, yeah, a modern soft SaaS company ought to be taking advantage of all of this. You're right. Yeah. How about you, Rich?
Yeah,
You
same
nodded. Yeah.
same insight. The most of the AI tools that our CS leaders are using are in their CRM
Mhm.
rather than a standalone
Right.
tool. And I know we're going to talk about AI standalone tools shortly, but that was the reality for our group.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I mean, I imagine everyone will have like a standalone tool like a chat GPT and then, rely on their vendors across the different parts of the stack to provide their AI. I think that's probably what we
Mhm.
can all expect. Well, then we ask, hey, what tech do you think? This is actually we're asking, the respondent, what do you think actually has a positive impact, right? And so, so the CRM does, the customer success platform, call recording. So these were the top ones. Let me actually show you the next slide, which I also think is interesting, is then we did the real math, which is like, okay, let's correlate what you actually use to the NRR that told us about. And if you take a look at this, it would imply that the most impactful technology to net revenue retention would be the CRM, the most impactful, and then a customer success platform, and then a support platform, and then a learning management system. I mean, like, Carrie, you said that you're surprised people don't use everything because I think everything together, helps with NRR. But is there anything here that stands out to you, Carrie?
Yeah, and here I would just caution everybody to say that the NRR with technology numbers are statistically equivalent. So,
Mhm.
they all contribute. Like your NRR is going to be better if you have these technologies, and you need all four of those are contributing in the same way, essentially. So again, I mean, I think it's being short-sighted to say we're not going to get the tools, we're not going to have the functions when 70-something% of your revenue. And Yuman, you talked earlier about the transition from being a startup that's all about getting net new customers to a company that has customers and is harvesting revenue from existing customers. And to me, the lack of when companies lack these technologies and these functions, what that shows is they're not making that transition, as they should be.
I see. So their tool stack's not evolving the way the revenue works. Yeah,
Right.
that's a
It
good
doesn't
point.
match the
Yeah.
opportunity.
Rich, you have a lot of, in Pavilion, there are a lot of folks who sell all these types of tools. Is there any thoughts you have about the technology?
Well, I think it explains why LMS technology often is the hardest sell. If you just look at the delta between the bars, right? It seems what this seems to be saying is LMS is driving the least amount of impact. Still driving lots of impact, but driving the least amount of impact compared to some of these other tools. And I think that's consistent with if you talk to LMS providers in the Pavilion network, that's what they see.
They're seeing that it's harder to talk about ROI and all that impact. Is that what you're
Not
saying?
seen as core. It's just not seen as
Right,
tech stack as these other tools, CRM support and
right.
this platform.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's probably the third thing you buy or the fourth thing you buy, right? Like you got to get that done, then you got to get this done, and then now you got to get LMS, right?
statistically, everybody looking at these numbers should think they're equivalent.
Mhm.
So yeah,
That's right.
in other words, each of these four categories have an equivalent NRR, and missing them hurts you equivalently. The only one that's different is CRM, where it hurts
Mhm.
you
Dramatic.
more if you don't
Right,
have it. Right? The
right.
others are you should be looking at this saying, okay, I need all three of these things. And right.
Yeah, it does feel like, I suppose you could have built your own CRM, right? Rather than, having a off-the-shelf CRM. That does feel tough to do. All right. Hey, before I shift gears a little bit, if any of you in the audience have questions, we have the Q&A function open. So go ahead and actually throw in a question there if you have a question for Carrie, Rich, or myself. All right, let's talk about AI. We actually asked about AI as well. And we asked you to, basically say, hey, where do you think you stand with the use of AI? And, level 1, level 2, level 3, most folks are really still in the exploration or the tactical use. Carrie, I know you did a study from your own organization. Any thoughts on what we've seen and what you saw?
Yeah, this matches it really well. So, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, 83% of buyers are either mandated or strongly recommended that their next solution in whatever category have AI capabilities. So, in other words, they're being told if you're going to go buy something, it's got to have AI in it. And then we have expectations about how you're going to be more productive because it does. However, the number one question that buyers have about we call it AI inside, is what does it do? So buyers are being mandated to have it inside whatever they're buying, but they don't even know when they start that look what it will be doing. And so that is exploration stage for sure. I would have thought probably exploration stage it would be a bigger bar and slightly more. So I think there's not a ton of that kind of higher level use of AI yet. I mean, there's certainly some, but not a ton of it.
Rich, what are you saying?
I think we've moved into a stage where there are incremental improvements happening because of AI in a lot of businesses. So that's probably your tactical use bar here. I think we are not yet at a stage where we've seen many companies that would call themselves mature using AI, but that they are starting to see impact. For example, thinking about front office versus back office tools, that many companies are experimenting with agentic AI on the front end on their website. I don't think it's embedded yet, but I think over time, companies seem to be making investments in that kind of tooling for their business. In the back office, you see tools like, Glean and Gong and even ChatGPT, where they're helping to drive 10, 15% improvement. We had some folks at 20% productivity improvement on their teams. So if we were here 6 months ago, I'm not sure I could even have pointed quite as confidently to proven use cases. I still would say we're not mature. We're not seeing a lot of maturity, but there is implementation happening, and it seems to be making a difference at some companies.
So I'm going to ask the three of us. We've seen a few ups and downs. We've seen technologies that was supposed to make a huge and have made a huge impact. When AI first came out, it felt like it was so big, so all-encompassing, so dramatic, and people really wanted to jump on the bandwagon. Does this feel slow to you, the adoption curve, that is still nascent, or is this the way it always has worked?
I would say it's probably about right. I talked with a lot of people lately about the .com boom and bust originally, and that we had the .com boom, and that was the first .com era. There was a crash, but I think if you look back and say, well, what did we expect the world would look like in 20 years? It kind of looks like that, right? I mean, everything is exactly, I think, what you would expect it to have looked like before the .com crash. Like everything is, and I think that's kind of what's going to happen here. Is there's a lot
There's
of
going to be an AI crash, Carrie. There's going to be. Is that what you're?
Well, I mean, that's
what
what Sam Altman says, right? That there's a lot of hype, a lot of, I see a lot of people going out and saying, I don't even consider something unless it's going to give me 100% ROI, or or 10x ROI rather. 100% is just 2x, 10x ROI, and I think really, wouldn't 20% improvement be really nice? You know, wouldn't it be great?
What from a historical point of view, Rich, what have you how do you feel about all this?
It feels like the hype is far ahead of the actual proof, um,
Mhm.
and proven ROI and proven use cases. You can't escape AI conversations. I happen to be in San Francisco today for a pavilion event this evening, and on the drive in from the airport, every single billboard on the ride in was an AI tool that I am being told I absolutely need to use.
Yes,
Um,
it's true.
but it feels, it just feels like the hype
All
is a
right.
little ahead of the reality.
It's when you go home back to Boston and then you know, when every billboard screams AI to you, when that's when you know it's probably
Yeah.
here, right?
Feel like that's a slap at Boston, you might.
Sorry, I don't
Well,
want
it's all
I don't
healthcare, boss. You know, there's
Ah,
there's a great quote from Hemingway about uh, how he went broke, or one of the characters in his books went broke. It said, slowly at first and then all at once.
no,
I think
once.
that's kind of what what applies here.
That's a good way to
I
put
do think, I do think history is a fairly reliable gauge, right? I think the speed is often unpredictable, but I think the path feels predictable. And that, if we go back to .com, it was sort of on the order of AI, where it's like, this changes everything, and it did change everything.
Yeah.
But we did go through a few cycles of despair, a real bust there, and then like a slow climb, back to, oh yeah, everything we thought it would do, it
Yeah.
happened. It happened. So it's probably fair to say the same thing about AI, right? Everything that we think will do will happen. But whether it takes another 5 years or 15 years, that's probably the part of it I probably wouldn't predict.
Yeah.
Um, well, let's talk about how AI is actually being used today. So 73% call summarization, 50% of people are using it for account research, 45% for content creation. I know we talked about this, this is sort of okay, yes, yes, you should be doing this. But it also feels fairly pedestrian. I don't know. Should we celebrate this, or do we say, oh, we got to be beyond this? I don't know. What are your thoughts, Carrie?
I think it's great. It is pedestrian, kind of boring, but I think you've got three things here that could each give you 15-20% productivity improvement each if you use them and do them right. And, wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah.
If you're using them and doing them right.
By the way, these are all super handy. Yeah, I do these all day, right? Every day.
Yeah.
So yeah, Rich.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're very thank you, Carrie, for bringing the positive light on this. Rich, how do you feel?
Yeah, I think it just proves the point we were saying that the hype is a little bit ahead of the impact. Call summarization, account research, and content creation tools have been around for a little bit, and these are not like some new way of doing something.
Mhm.
They are tools to make an existing way of doing something better.
Mhm.
And so I think Carrie kind of nailed it, but it does tell us the hype is a little bit farther ahead of the reality.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about 2026. And so, you know, given what maybe I'll summarize real quickly, right? We've stabilized, using the topmost metric that really customer folks care about is revenue retention. We've stabilized. There's some interesting stats that say, hey, it's getting better. I think those of us on the call feels like, the worst is behind us, and it feels, like things are stabilizing a bit. So, I think the message that I would want to bring to folks, and Rich and Carrie, I'd like to get your thoughts on this, that it's time to play offense. I think we've actually been playing defense for the last 3 years, which is, I get it, right? It's bumpy. You want to protect your assets. You don't want, spending money was risky because you didn't think you're going to have a return, and so we all did play very defensively. So 2026, I think, is a year that you need to go play offense. You use 2025, the second half of 2025 as your baseline. Like, I think that's second half of 2025 is sort of normality in 2025. Use that. fight for the resources, right? Once again, you own 74% of the revenue. You deserve the resources. We showed you what the tech stack, should look like. I think both Carrie and Rich feel like you've got to use the right tech in order to service your customers. And then, of course, AI, it's inevitable. Move up the maturity ladder with purpose. Look, is this good advice? Rich, is this good advice for 2026? Play offense?
Absolutely. And I think that the opportunity for CCOs or C-suite generally is to tell our CEOs, tell our boards what good looks like. Because even though they're pushing pressure down on all of us to, well, shouldn't we be doing more with AI? Shouldn't we be more productive? Not all of them have the plan to do it. Give them the plan. Be the developer of that plan. Recommend the tools. Show them the way. Be much more proactive in defining what success looks like.
Yes. So that's another way of playing offense, right? Is to show the way, right? Don't be told what to do because you're probably not going to love it. So Carrie, your thoughts?
I think one thing I would suggest just with AI in general is try to turn off the incoming messages about the tools and things that exist, and sit down with your team, with your leadership, with your board, and whoever, and think about the questions that you have not asked before, but would love to know, because in the past you wouldn't be able to know the answer to the question. What about your customers do you want to know that you've just never even dared to try? Maybe you can use synthetic data to understand your buyers better. Maybe you can use AI to understand what buyers really care about, or to really dive into the metrics on what's driving churn or not. There are questions that we've just never asked because getting the answer would be so difficult before. I think that's the thing we have to reset. It's like, what's possible now? It's different than what it was last year. And you need to be aggressive about finding what that's going to be.
That's a great lesson for 2026, right? Really take advantage of AI to do things that were not before possible. Well, let me end there and go into the Q&A section of of our webinar. So there's a QR code there. Go ahead and grab the study. Once again, this is the Customer Revenue Leadership Study of 2025. These were the logos on the screen here are those who were our sponsors. So go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A section. Let me start by asking one. Actually, Carrie, I think you're a great person to answer this. So there's a lot of data, right? We're swimming in customer data, usage metrics, engagement scores, health scores, intent signals.
Yeah.
How do you, and we create more every day. Like, how do you advise folks, right? Once you collect the data, once you do it, like, how do you actually, keep it from being just noise? How do
Yeah.
you get insight out of it?
This is such an important mindset shift that has to happen. Like most people, if you're in leadership, you got to leadership because you were good at things and you knew some things. Now there's all kinds of data, and you've got ideas and biases about which pieces of data matter. This is the metric I think is most important or whatever. And you need to drop that all together, at least for a short period of time, and get whatever data you can, if it's even marginally related, and feed it into AI and let it tell you what matters, right? And then apply your expertise, your experience there. But you have to start at zero now about what matters, because if you don't, you're going to end up just going down the same path you've always gone down, and the AI and the data is not going to help. So that there is a ton of noise out there, but what AI is great at is finding the signal in the noise. Let it do that.
That's great. And you do have help, right? That's good. It's fantastic. Hey, Rich, you just had your go to your GTM conference, a big conference, hundreds of people. Was there something that came out? I love big conferences where people get together. There's always a vibe, right? There's always sort of optimism or pessimism going in a new year. Like what, from that conference, how do you feel about 2026?
I feel optimism, and certainly the vibe around the conference in DC a couple weeks ago was optimistic. I think I'd go back to that comment early on in this session, Yuman, where I said it doesn't feel like the sky is falling quite as much anymore, and I think people are ready to tackle the challenges. There was a strong sense in the room that no one's been a go-to-market executive in 2026. Like no one has done that already. This is all uncharted
Mm,
territory for a lot of us. And so to figure out what it means to be a successful go-to-market executive in 2026, we kind of have to rely on each other. Sessions like this, our peers, et cetera. That was a really strong takeaway from DC.
that is interesting. So I'm going to say that it may be bumpy for the next few more years because everything's changing, right? I mean, that's essentially what you're saying, Rich. Everything's changing again. Is that right?
Yeah, and it's stuff we've never seen before.
Right.
Um,
So either be super excited about it like Rich is, or let it, don't let it
choice we have, Yuman.
choose to accept it. Don't fight it. Don't fight it. No, I agree with you. It is I do think that it can be debilitating, right, when change happens. But choose the excitement, choose the learning, and I think we can all, do pretty interesting things. All right, I'm going to stop there. Carrie, thank you so much. Rich, thanks. It was great having a conversation with you, and thanks for participating in the study. We'll see you real soon. Okay, the rest of 2025 and into 2026. See you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Yuman.
Thank you, Yuman.